This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to our daily crime and justice update. We have a heavy slate of stories today, ranging from tragic courtroom revelations to international investigations. Let's get right into the details.
A Texas killer sang during his victim's final moments.
A radio star's murder exposed a dangerous motorcycle gang.
A Hawaii snorkel tour turned into a violent stabbing.
A son left his elderly mother in a shed.
Parents are charged in the death of their toddler.
Massive bone fragments were discovered near a Mexican lake.
A Canadian chef pleads guilty to aiding multiple suicides.
A Florida doctor allegedly removed the wrong internal organ.
Starting in Texas, in a Fort Worth courtroom, the trial of Tanner Lynn Horner has taken a gut-wrenching turn. Horner, a former FedEx delivery driver, pleaded guilty to the 2022 kidnapping and murder of 7-year-old Athena Strand, just as his trial was beginning. Despite the plea, the trial is proceeding because prosecutors are determined to seek the death penalty. The jury's primary role now is to listen to the evidence and decide if Horner should be executed. The details are harrowing. Horner snatched Athena from her home after delivering a box of Barbies intended as her Christmas gift. To hide his actions, he placed a sticky note over the internal camera of his delivery van, but he failed to realize the microphone was still active, capturing the entire ordeal for investigators to find later.
The audio played for the jury was so disturbing that the media was ordered to cut their cameras. Reporters inside described a scene of pure torture, with jurors sobbing as they heard Athena's voice. She can be heard crying and bravely telling Horner no when he made inappropriate requests, citing her mother's teachings. Perhaps most chilling was the background noise. As Horner drove and repeatedly attempted to strangle the child, the van's radio was playing Jingle Bell Rock. The recording captured Athena's final gasps for air over the festive music. While there was no physical evidence of sexual penetration, the audio left little doubt about the sexual nature of the attack. The community and the family are now waiting to see if the jury will return the ultimate sentence for these horrific actions.
Now to New Jersey. The 2012 murder of beloved radio personality April Kaufman in her Jersey Shore home remained a mystery for years, but investigators eventually uncovered a web of crime that went far beyond a simple domestic dispute. April was a well-known veterans' rights advocate who was found shot to death in her bedroom. At first, the scene baffled police because there were no signs of a break-in or robbery. Her husband, Dr. Jim Kaufman, appeared devastated at the scene, even vomiting when he learned of her death. However, as the years passed, the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office and the FBI refused to let the case go cold. They eventually discovered that the doctor wasn't the grieving husband he appeared to be, but was actually involved in a massive illegal enterprise that led to his wife's targeted execution.
It turns out, Dr. Kaufman had been running an illicit drug ring in partnership with the Pagans motorcycle gang. April had reportedly discovered the operation and was threatening to expose him and file for divorce. To protect his medical practice and his criminal ties, the doctor hired a hitman through his gang connections to kill her. The investigation also revealed that Jim Kaufman had built his reputation on stolen valor, claiming to be a decorated Green Beret from the Vietnam War, a story that was entirely fabricated. This case is a testament to the persistence of local investigators who spent years connecting the dots between a high society doctor and a dangerous biker gang. It took a long time, but the truth about the drug ring and the cold-blooded plot finally brought justice to April's family and the Philly community.
Next to Hawaii. A peaceful snorkel tour off the coast of Kailua Kona turned into a scene of terror when a passenger allegedly attacked the boat's captain. Avery Nissen, a 21-year-old from Kansas, is now facing charges of second-degree attempted murder and multiple counts of assault. The incident occurred on a Thursday afternoon during what was supposed to be a routine 3-hour tour. According to police, Nissen used a fillet knife to repeatedly stab the 62-year-old captain in the head, hands, and lower abdomen. The attack was so sudden and violent that other passengers on the vessel had to intervene and physically restrain Nissen until the boat could return to Honokohau Harbor. When the ship finally docked, patrol officers were waiting to take the suspect into custody, while emergency responders rushed the injured captain to a nearby hospital for urgent medical treatment.
The motive for this brutal stabbing remains a complete mystery to authorities. There was no reported prior conflict between the young man and the captain. making the unprovoked nature of the crime even more shocking for the tight-knit boating community in Hawaii. The captain is currently listed in stable condition, which is fortunate given the severity of the wounds described by the police. Nissen is being held on a very high bail of over $1.5 million, reflecting the perceived danger he poses to the public. He is scheduled to appear in court on Monday to face these serious felony charges. Investigators are still asking anyone who was on the boat, or who might have information about Nissen's background, to come forward as they try to understand what triggered such a violent outburst in the middle of the ocean.
Moving to New York. In a disturbing case of elder abuse from upstate New York, 64-year-old Joseph Polizzi has been arrested following the death of his 89-year-old mother, Nancy. State police discovered Nancy's body in a shed on the family's property in Carlisle, where she had apparently been living since August of 2024. The shed was completely unfit for human habitation, lacking both heat and running water. This is particularly horrific considering the local temperatures in February dropped as low as 4 degrees Fahrenheit. An autopsy later revealed that Nancy died from sepsis, caused by untreated, gangrenous bed sores. The medical examiner officially ruled the death a homicide, pointing to a total lack of basic care. Joseph, who lived in the main house just steps away from the shed, was his mother's primary caretaker, yet he allegedly allowed her to waste away in these freezing, unsanitary conditions.
The investigation showed that in the weeks leading up to her death, Nancy was unable to walk, speak, or even feed herself. Despite her obvious and desperate need for medical intervention, her son reportedly failed to seek any help or provide even the most basic medical attention. Joseph Polizzi now faces charges of criminally negligent homicide and endangering the welfare of a vulnerable elderly person. He was booked into the Schoharie County Correctional Facility with bail set at $5,000 cash. This case has sparked outrage in the local community, highlighting the tragic vulnerability of the elderly when those responsible for their care fail so fundamentally. Prosecutors are focusing on the fact that the defendant was fully aware of his mother's deteriorating state while he lived in comfort just a few yards away, leaving her to die in a cold, dark shed.
Shifting to Pennsylvania. Authorities in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, have charged a mother and father in the brutal death of their 2-year-old son. Cynthia Robinson is accused of beating the toddler to death, while the father, Frank Walton Sr., allegedly prevented any medical help from reaching the child in an attempt to hide the abuse. When police arrived at the home in Chester, they found the boy unresponsive and in cardiac arrest with visible head trauma. He was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital, with the cause of death determined to be blunt force trauma to both his head and torso. In a truly cynical move, Robinson initially tried to blame the killing on one of the boy's siblings. However, investigators quickly determined that the scenarios she described were factually impossible, leading them to focus their attention back on the parents and their history of child endangerment.
The details of the days leading up to the boy's death are heartbreaking. Witnesses reported hearing Robinson shouting profanities at the child and threatening to hit him because she was tired of him. She allegedly dropped the boy from her waist while he was already bleeding. Despite the obvious injuries, Walton Sr. reportedly ensured the child stayed hidden from medical professionals to protect the couple from legal consequences, which ultimately led to the boy's death. Robinson now faces first-degree murder charges, while Walton is charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. The district attorney emphasized that these parents had a fundamental responsibility to love and protect their child, yet they chose violence and silence instead. The 3 other children who were in the home at the time have been removed as the legal process against their parents moves forward in the court system.
Now to Mexico. Just weeks before Mexico City is set to host the World Cup, a grim discovery near Lake Chalco has highlighted the country's ongoing forensic crisis. A volunteer group of families searching for missing loved ones reported finding over 1,000 bone fragments in the area. While city prosecutors initially announced the discovery of about 300 fragments believed to belong to 3 people, the volunteer collective insists the scale is much larger. They claim to have found hundreds more fragments, even in areas that government agents had already supposedly cleared. This discrepancy has fueled tensions between activists and the government, with families accusing authorities of trying to downplay the tragedy to avoid negative international attention ahead of the global sporting event. The site has become a flashpoint for protesters who are demanding a full and transparent investigation into the thousands of disappearances linked to the drug war.
The scale of the violence in Mexico is staggering. with over 130,000 people currently listed as missing since 2006. A United Nations committee has even labeled this crisis a crime against humanity, pointing to a pattern of attacks on civilians and a lack of government action. President Claudia Sheinbaum has defended her administration's policies, but the families on the ground say they are the ones doing the actual work of recovery. In cities like Guadalajara, which will also host World Cup games, the number of missing persons is particularly high due to cartel activity. The activists are demanding that the searches at Lake Chalco continue without interruption until every fragment is recovered. As the world prepares to turn its eyes toward Mexico for soccer, these families are determined to ensure the world also sees the devastating reality of those who have been lost to the drug war.
Next to Canada, Kenneth Law, a former chef from the Toronto area, has agreed to a plea deal that will see 14 murder charges withdrawn in exchange for a guilty plea to aiding suicide. Law was arrested in 2023 after an international investigation revealed he was using a series of websites to sell sodium nitrite to vulnerable people worldwide. Sodium nitrite is a substance used for curing meats, but it is lethal if ingested in high quantities. Canadian police believe Law sent at least 1,200 packages to over 40 countries. The impact was devastating. In Britain alone, authorities identified 88 people who died after purchasing products from his sites. While assisted suicide is legal in Canada under very specific medical conditions for adults, Law's operation was entirely illegal and targeted people as young as 16 who were in emotional distress or crisis.
The legal shift from murder to aiding suicide is significant. A murder conviction in Canada carries a mandatory life sentence, whereas abetting suicide has a maximum penalty of 14 years. Law's attorney confirmed the plea agreement, and the case is set to return to court in Ontario on Monday. This case has triggered investigations in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand as global authorities grapple with the ease of selling lethal substances online. The victims in Canada were between the ages of 16 and 36, highlighting the tragic reach of Law's business. For many families, the plea deal is a bittersweet step toward closure, as it ensures a conviction but avoids the lengthy and painful process of a multi-count murder trial. It also serves as a stark reminder of the need for better digital safeguards for those struggling with mental health challenges.
Finally, in Florida, a Florida surgeon, Dr. Thomas Shaknovsky, is facing a second-degree manslaughter charge after a catastrophic error during a routine operation. The victim, 70-year-old William Bryan, was on vacation from Alabama when he fell ill and was advised to undergo a laparoscopic splenectomy at Ascension Sacred Heart Emerald Coast Hospital. However, during the procedure, investigators allege that Shaknovsky removed Bryan's liver instead of his spleen. Chillingly, the doctor's operative report made no mention of the mistake, instead describing the organ he removed as a severely deformed and challenging spleen. The word liver never appeared in his notes, despite the fact that the liver is significantly larger and has many more connection points than the spleen. An attorney for the family argued that such a mistake is impossible to make accidentally, as even a novice surgeon would recognize the anatomical differences between the two organs.
The Walton County Sheriff's Office stated that the grand jury's indictment followed a thorough investigation into the facts of the case. This wasn't the first time Dr. Shaknovsky's surgical competence had been questioned. Reports indicate he was involved in another wrong-site surgery in 2023 where he allegedly removed part of a patient's pancreas instead of the intended target. The medical community and the public are reeling from the details of this case, which suggests a pattern of gross negligence. For William Bryan's family, the loss is unspeakable, turning a simple vacation into a nightmare of medical malpractice. The doctor now faces serious prison time if convicted of manslaughter. This case serves as a terrifying reminder of the trust patients place in medical professionals and the devastating consequences when that trust is met with such a fundamental and fatal lack of care.
That concludes our daily roundup. Thank you for joining us for these important updates. Follow this show for your next daily briefing on the stories that matter most. We'll see you tomorrow.